Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another week of News Dose. It is Monday, and how about the return of Game of Thrones on HBO? I mean, we might not get the next mainline book for another 10 years, but hey, the show is back, kind of, and I thought it was a pretty decent opening myself for the first episode, but nonetheless, we do have a lot of game news to get into today. We do have a new update for the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition as the first domino just fell. An actual regulator just announced their response, and this is a very good sign for Microsoft and Xbox going forward. So we're going to talk about that today, though on the opposite side of things, trouble seems to be brewing over in PlayStation land, or is there really? Technically, Sony is being sued for a ton of money, but will this actually get anywhere? And that's where I'm a little bit more skeptical, to say the least. So yes, we do have a lot to get into today, but before we do, make sure to hit those buttons below. Subscribe, like, and of course, that bell notification button as well. Hey, if you listen close enough, it might even make a bell noise. Just maybe. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, right? But yeah, let's just go and get into things though, and I was originally going to start today with some Gamescom leaks, as there are a few out there regarding Sonic Frontiers and another possible day one Xbox Game Pass game. I mean, there's just always a new Game Pass game, but with Gamescom being tomorrow, I decided not to talk about them today, that way I don't spoil the showcase for anybody out there. However, what I decided to do is that if you absolutely just cannot wait until tomorrow when we'll talk about this stuff, I will leave some links in the description below. So a little bit of a middle ground there, but again, I will talk about this stuff tomorrow, right after Gamescom, as I'll cover the show as I usually do. For our first official topic of the day, though, we did get some more information on Death Stranding coming over to PC Game Pass tomorrow on August 23rd. This was a huge story and really just a huge surprise when it was announced last week. Obviously, with the Death Stranding IP being owned by Sony, you wouldn't necessarily expect it to come over to PC Game Pass. But a spokesperson did respond to PushSquare.com, giving us more information on what I think many of us already believed, but it is now 100% confirmed. You can take a look at their response here, where they said, "Matters relating to the PC release of Death Stranding are managed by Kojima Productions and 505 Games. Sony Interactive Entertainment has no involvement in this promotion." So there you have it. This isn't really surprising per se, but like I said last week, 505 Games handles the publishing on PC, and Sony doesn't really have much of a say on where it appears despite them owning the IP. Now, however, with that said, I do think that you can kind of question what type of contract Sony signed, allowing them to basically have no control whatsoever of their very own IP. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think that this all kind of boils down to Death Stranding being one of Sony's first games on PC. I don't think that they really cared as much at the time, and I certainly don't think that they imagined something like this happening. I mean, sure, it's kind of amusing to think about in retrospect, but Death Stranding ultimately was a game that they kind of used to test the market out with, and while it's probably not the best look for Sony in the world, it still means more exposure for their own IP, which is, that's still a very important thing, especially if it gets a sequel in the future, as is rumored. With all that said, though, one thing that we are seeing right now is this relationship between Xbox and Kojima. I mean, he's already confirmed to be working on a new game with Xbox, and now here he's also supporting PC Game Pass as well. So a very interesting relationship between the two, and I think this is just the latest example of Xbox really trying to improve their relationships with these high-profile Japanese developers. Let's go and talk about that Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition again, though, and this will probably be a reoccurring topic over the next few months, but yes, an actual regulator has now officially approved the buyout. This is the first approval, though this is a smaller market for Xbox, being Saudi Arabia. So there's still definitely some big hurdles for Microsoft, most notably being the FTC in places like the UK, but still, this is a very good sign for the overall outlook of this acquisition. I kind of look at this as a bit of a domino effect, if you will, and if anything, the question of whether or not this acquisition can actually make it through regulations, that's always been the real big question here. Well, its chances of making it through regulations, I think, just shot up here, even if ever so slightly. Now, the reason I say that is because even though this is a smaller regulator in a smaller territory, the fact that they saw no issue here that kind of speaks to other regions as well. That does give us some insight to how other regulators might be thinking. I mean, they're all kind of looking at similar things, and if one approves of the buyout, there's also a good chance that other regulators will see things in a similar light. Now, there's not necessarily a guarantee in any of that, but the question of is there really enough to stop this acquisition? Is what Microsoft doing here anti-competitive in any type of way? And at the very least, Saudi Arabia, they said no, this is all fine, or there's not really enough here that we can use to actually block it. See, I think some of the confusion among fans out there who are against this buyout is that, well, it's nearly a $70 billion acquisition. It's obviously massive, and we've never really seen a buyout of this caliber, not even close. So there has to be a problem here, right? But no, that's not actually how all this works. Regulators can't simply block something because it costs a lot of money. They have specific rules and specific guidelines to follow, and in this case, they have to look at how this buyout will affect the game industry specifically. Now, there's no question that there's going to be a big impact here, but just based on how the game industry works, I think that would be very difficult for these regulators to actually prove that this is anti-competitive in any meaningful way. You have to remember that even if a regulator comes out and they say, no, this acquisition is not allowed, and they try to stop it, well, then Microsoft, they would come out and they would likely take this to court, and for that matter, they'd probably win. These regulators, they can't just simply deny a buyout because it has an impact and that it's nearly $70 billion. There has to be a real reason that they can definitively prove in court as to why this shouldn't be allowed, and I don't think they really have that. You can even look at the public documents between Microsoft and the Brazil regulator. Microsoft goes into great detail as to how the game industry works and why it should be proved. They do actually make some very well-made points as well. And they would do the same exact thing in court, and I think that would be very difficult for any of these regulators to legally counter. And I think regulators, they have to know that. So on one side, Microsoft, without a doubt, they're going to receive a lot of scrutiny, as they should. I mean, we are talking about a nearly $70 billion acquisition. They're certainly going to do their research. But in terms of actually being able to block it, I believe, again, that would be very, very difficult. So again, even though Saudi Arabia is a smaller territory, they are the first to approve, and this could give us some insight as to what other regulators are looking at, and we'll likely see several more of these responses here in the coming months. The FTC, though, that's the one that we really need to keep an eye on, but per usual, anytime we get an update, I, of course, will let you all know as soon as possible, and that is why you need to hit that bell notification button below. Let it ring, let it ring. Next up, let's talk about the NPD sales results for the month of July, and I think this was an interesting month in terms of new Japanese releases. It wasn't necessarily the biggest month in terms of huge AAA blockbusters, sorry for you fans out there, but I was very curious to see how some of the Japanese games would do in the United States, which we'll kind of talk about here in just a second. First, let's go over some of the hardware first, and as you can see here, posted by Matt Piscatella over on Twitter, he stated, PlayStation 5 led the market in hardware spending during both July and 2022 year to date, while Switch sold the most units in both time periods. So nothing really too surprising here. The Nintendo Switch continues to be the best-selling hardware in terms of total units sold, as they pretty much are on a monthly basis, though with the PS5 costing more, consumers of course will spend more in terms of dollar sales. In fact, both the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series saw a double-digit percentage increase compared to last year, which is very, very good to see. As far as software, though, you can take a look here at the top 20 games for the month of July, where we have 3 new releases, and very notably, the #1 spot was claimed by a new game, being Multiverses. This game has actually taken off in a big way and has been a lot more successful than what I would have expected. This is Warner Brothers' take on platform fighters, something like Smash Brothers, if you will, and they just announced this morning that it's already reached 20 million players. I think that this just kind of goes to prove that other companies besides just Nintendo can have a lot of success with these type of games if done right. Hopefully, PlayStation and Xbox is out there taking note of this. But nonetheless, Elden Ring continues to be a big hit for From Software at the #2 spot, which I love to see. Xenoblade 3, that also opened up at the #4 spot, which, keep in mind, it launched on July 29th. So this is only a few days worth of sales, but still, to see it in the top 5 is definitely noteworthy considering just 10 or so years ago, fans in the West were begging Nintendo to localize Xenoblade. So this franchise has come a very long way since then. This game has definitely hit the big time, and it's definitely worth celebrating for you Xenoblade fans out there, myself included. What a great franchise. I can also say the same thing for Digimon fans out there, as Survive, that opened up at the number 8 spot. I mean, Bandai Namco basically just sent this game out with little exposure. It released the same day as Xenoblade 3 and had little to no review coverage at all. And despite all that, I mean, it seemed like Bandai Namco had no faith in this game, but despite all that, it still made the top 10. That is just amazing to see, all things considering. I've actually been playing Digimon Survive as well, and I would definitely recommend it as long as you kind of understand that it is a visual novel first and foremost. It is a very good one though, and I do like its tactics battles when you actually get to do that type of stuff. Unfortunately, Live Alive HD did not make the top 20 though. I mean, I have heard it's been doing well digitally, but I think that with it not appearing in the top 20 here, I think this just kind of speaks to Square Enix's inability to space their games out from other notable releases. I personally don't think that was very smart of them to release this game just 7 days before a game like Xenoblade 3, and even Digimon Survive to a lesser degree. There's just too many interesting Japanese games in a short time frame. Hopefully, though, this one will pick up as time goes on. Now, we do also have kind of a strange story regarding PlayStation, as Sony is being sued for £5 billion over in the UK. So, I mean, yes, we're talking about a lot of money here, but what's actually happening, and is there a real case against Sony? Well, that's certainly very debatable, as we'll discuss, but if you take a look here, it says, the legal claim is a collective action against the gaming company brought by consumer rights champion Alex Nill. It accuses the company of breach of competition law by abusing its market power to impose unfair terms and conditions on game developers and publishers, forcing up prices for consumers. It allegedly ripped people off by charging a 30% commission on every digital game and in-game purchase made through the PlayStation Store. Consumers have been overcharged for their digital gaming purchases by as much as £5 billion over the last 6 years, the legal action states. So this is one of those class action lawsuits where consumers will get paid a small bit of money if any of this is actually proven, but I mean, good luck with any of that. Now, when I first read this headline, my immediate thought process was that this is in regards to Sony raising the price of their $60 games to $70. Maybe somebody is claiming that they're abusing their market power, forcing their consumers to pay $10 more, as they were the market leader last generation. But instead, they're talking about the 70-30 cut for developers and Sony themselves. So what that means is that for every game a developer or publisher sells, Sony will get a 30% cut. And here, I guess they're trying to make an argument that if Sony asked for a smaller cut, then games will be cheaper for consumers. Now, that's not actually how all this actually works, though, as is proven by the Epic Games Store. Epic takes a smaller cut on their storefront, and games are still the same price as we see elsewhere, as far as I'm aware. I mean, maybe there's a few situations that I'm not aware of, but more or less, it just gives developers more money per game sold, which is still a good thing to see. But if we go back to Sony getting a 30% cut, that's actually a pretty standard thing within the game industry outside of, again, Epic Games. Valve also does the 70-30 cut, and I believe Xbox does the same. So this is a very strange situation that I don't think will end well for the claimants. If anything, Sony will just drag all these other publishers into court with them, as we saw with the Epic Games versus Apple case. I mean, it's always interesting to see those business documents go a little bit more public. I mean, you know, that's fun for us as consumers, but I don't see much coming from this case at all. Good luck, I guess, but yeah, I don't see much coming from any of this. Let's go and take a look at the poll of the day, though. We're asked you all, which Bethesda game releasing in the first half of 2023 are you most excited about? Bethesda does have a couple of big games, as we can see here, though 63% of you all, being the wide majority, did vote for Starfield. Then Redfall only took 15% of the votes, while 17% of you said neither. You're not interested in either one of these games. Now, Bethesda also has a couple of other big games that could potentially be releasing on Xbox sometime here soon, one being Ghostwire Tokyo, that That should be early next year. And then you have Deathloop. That timed exclusivity deal for Sony will end actually next month. Though in this specific poll, I really just wanted to focus on completely new releases being Redfall and Starfield. Now, I kind of expected these results here. Starfield is obviously a very huge and ambitious title. You know, this is a new IP coming from the Skyrim and Fallout studio, so there's obviously going to be a lot of excitement for this game. Whereas Redfall, this one's coming from Arcane, which has proven time and time again they're very, very talented and they make very, very good games, but they also make games that has a tendency of going a little bit more under the radar. Think of something like Prey or Dishonored. Both of those games are very good, but they're not nearly as popular as something like The Elder Scrolls or Fallout. So I'm not necessarily overly surprised by the results here, but I will say that I think everybody needs to be paying attention to Redfall. I think that game looks really, really good. I know we talked about it last week, but every time I see this game, I come away extremely impressed, just more impressed every single time I see it. Still though, I do understand the excitement for Starfield. It really does look incredibly ambitious, and in a lot of ways, it really looks like Fallout in space, which I say that in the best way possible, but it is Bethesda's biggest game yet. They have several handcrafted planets with your more traditional Bethesda-based story that fans have come to love so much. That alone, I think, will offer players countless hours of gameplay, and I think that that's what most people are probably going to focus their time on. But for those seeking even more, this is one of the things about this game is that, it also has 100 plus procedurally generated planets. So, this game in some ways could be endless if that's something that you truly want. There's also the ability to fly your own spaceship around. You can customize it and fight in space, which that's really cool. But for that matter, just kind of look at Skyrim as an example. All these years later, fans still play that game, and Starfield very much could be that with the amount of content that it has. Now we really just kind of need to see if Bethesda can meet its lofty expectations, so here's to hoping. Anyways though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.